Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 7th year of the Dr. Quack podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Quack.
And I'm the important one, Mr. Mayhem. We start off year 7 by going way into the past.
Oh, yeah. This one here, this was a classic in some respects, but there was also some controversy with it. We're talking about the Clash of the Champions.
Clash of Champions 1, the very, very first one that aired on the Superstation TBS.
Yes, and here's the facts about this show. A lot of people were upset about it because it was also going against WrestleMania 4.
And it actually did better than WrestleMania 4 in several markets because Vince McMahon had shut out Starrcade 87 by saying, if you air the Starrcade, you don't get to air the Royal Rumble and you don't get to air Survivor Series. So they turned around and did the exact opposite by putting it live on television opposite WrestleMania.
Yeah, but we see how that worked out for both of them. But let's get into this show. You tell us what you think of this show. But we had to start out here in Greensboro, North Carolina at the Greensboro Coliseum.
They were always in Greensboro. It was one of their places they always went to. It was always a great crowd, and this crowd was very hot.
Yes, March 27th, 1988, to get that right. But, yeah, on commentary, we had Jim Ross and Bob Caudle.
Well, we actually had Tony Schiavone and Bob Caudle. They had Jim Ross walking around doing various interviews throughout the time. All of them were in the wrong place. Bob Caudle should have been doing the commentary. They should have had JR doing the play-by-play, and they should have had Tony Schiavone doing the interviews. That's what they were all the best at.
Yes, and that's why that gets my two-finger salute, because Tony Schiavone and Jim Ross, if you want to know where the pinnacle really started, I think it was at this show where there was heat in between them, because when eventually Tony Schiavone goes to the WWF, and Jim Ross is there, you've seen what happened to Tony Schiavone. Bye-bye, because he couldn't talk with a northern accent. You know, them two always seem to have that rivalry. You can always see Tony Schiavone, even at the end of this show, where he's like, I'm not going to let you hold this microphone. I'm holding this microphone.
Yep, Tony Schiavone has been, by all the people that work with him, to include Bobby Heenan, always called him a very small, very insecure man. He had to make sure his chair was higher than everybody else. He was that petty. And he started the feud. Jim Ross has talked about that basically was the starting point. Then Tony Schiavone left, then came back. And then Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone were battling over who was going to get the executive decision in '93 that Eric Bischoff ultimately got. But this is kind of where their feud started, and it's never gone away.
Yeah, now let's move on to the show, because the show was actually pretty decent here. Yep. Mike Rotunda taking on Jimmy Garvin in a college rules match.
You missed a couple things. Tom Miller was our ring announcer for this show. We also had Teddy Long, Randy Anderson, and Tommy Young were the referees for this show.
There you go.
And now let's go on to, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin with his wife, Precious, who was also his manager, taking on Mike Rotunda, part of the Varsity Club. One of the few gimmicks that Kevin Sullivan did, gimmick stables, that was not dark or demented.
No, it was. I loved the Varsity Club. I thought that was very solid. They knew how to work as a team. They got over his heels. And this match here, because of course a college rules match, like in college wrestling, amateur wrestling, a 1 count, that ends it. You know, your shoulders on the mat. And these guys worked this very well. I enjoyed this match. This was a great opener. I went 2 3/4 stars. I felt like this was a good start to the show.
Yeah, they did it 3 5-minute rounds. And, of course, Mike Rotunda retained his television title here by cheating. And I love how they put that over, that he wasn't working under amateur rules. But I really enjoyed the match. Both Jimmy Garvin and Mike Rotunda were amateur wrestlers, so they both knew what they were doing. It was a good match. I went 2.5, but I'm going to bump to 2 3/4. You're right. It was a really good opener, and the crowd started off hot and happy to see something different.
Yeah, I mean, the 80s, the crowds were usually pretty hot unless you really sucked, but they were happy here. But let's move on to the Midnight Express. Beautiful Bobby Eaton and Sweet Stan Lane with Jim Cornette taking on the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers, for the NWA United States Tag Team titles.
Jim Cornette has gone on record saying the greatest team he has ever worked is the Fantastics, Bobby Rogers and Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton. Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, these guys had tremendous chemistry. This was a very 80s tag team style match. Very 80s brawl, but it was a lot of fun. They all worked well together. They all did a really great job of entertaining the crowd. We did have a dusty finish in there, so they existed at this time. But I really enjoyed the match. I went 2.5 on this one. It was good. The other one kind of, because of the novelty, kind of was a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I went 3 stars. I actually enjoyed this tag team match. Cornette at his finest, being a manager. When you want to look at 80s managers, he was one of the best in this business, and he really did a great job riling up the crowd and, doing his interference to cause the disqualification and everything like that.
Yeah, the dusty finish kind of set me off a little bit. I wanted to see them go a little longer. That's why I only went 2.5, but it was still a great match.
It was definitely good. And then we got...
Since I know you didn't write it down, we get a very long television spot where they brought out a guy named Ken Osmond. Now, if you're not familiar with who Ken Osmond is, if you haven't watched Nick at Night or anything like that, he was Eddie Haskell from the original Leave It to Beaver television show. He appears on here as Eddie Haskell talking to Jim Cornette.
Yes.
And it was cheesy, but fine. Ken Osmond was a celebrity. Fine. It was, and at this time in '88, Leave It to Beaver appeared on TBS, so they were putting over the relationship they had. So I was fine with it. It wasn't horrible. It was just kind of...
It was funny.
Yeah, but it was odd to remember it now 25 years, 30 years later. It was a little, wait. Oh, yeah, that did happen at this time.
See?
And then we got an interview with Al Perez and Gary Hart. Al Perez was a great talent. He was, unfortunately, because he wasn't a great talker and he had a little bit of an attitude, he never really made it big. He was supposed to be the original Black Scorpion.
Yeah.
And then, again, he opened his mouth and said stupid things and went away. And they cut a really good promo. And then we get the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup rankings. Because this was a tournament thing that went on.
Why?
It was going on. They were ranking the teams because they had a little tournament, little battle royal tournament kind of thing, round robin. So they had Ivan Koloff and Dick Murdoch were number 10. Number 9 were Sting and Ron Garvin. Number 8, the Varsity Club. Number 7, the Fantastics. Number 6, Wyndham and Luger. Number 5, the Powers of Pain. Number 4, the Midnight Express. Number 3, the Road Warriors. Number 2, Dusty and Nikita. Number 1, Arn and Tully, who were the world champs, tag champs at the time.
Yeah, it made sense on that. This was back when you used to see in PWI magazine where you would see top 10s and people actually were legitimized on it. They're still out there. PWI is still out there, but not as many people read it.
And they're adding more companies in, and they're doing some top 10s, but it's a little bit more subjective, a little bit less the companies sending in and doing their rankings. PWI has to kind of figure it out. So they're not always right, not always great, but it still exists.
It does. And let's move on to my Quack Attack, because this match here was definitely one of my favorite matches. And I am talking about the Road Warriors and Dusty Rhodes taking on the Powers of Pain and Ivan Koloff in a barbed wire match. You got a lot of blood in this. You got a real great fight. And it's not taken away from the main event, but I loved this match. This was pure carnage. This was high quality.
Yeah, at this time, Road Warrior Animal, he came out wearing a hockey mask because he legitimately had a cracked orbital bone that he had suffered, so he had to protect his face. And it was Ivan Koloff came out with Paul Jones, and this one, the LOD came down with their longtime manager, Paul Ellering. And yes, this was just a straight blood fight. Because it was 6 guys all in the ring at the same time with barbed wire wrapped around the ring, it was really kind of cluttered together. You couldn't really pay attention to all the action, but it was just a fun fight.
Yes.
I went 3 stars. This was just a fun fight.
Yeah, that was me too. I went 3 stars with this. This was quality back then in the 80s where you got to see this stuff. Yep. You don't get to see much blood today because of COVID and things like that, right. So it was a great thing to see.
Yep. Road Warrior Animal pinned the Barbarian, and then they ganged up on Animal, took his hockey face protector off, started beating him down, and then Dusty Rhodes and Hawk came in with chairs, and it just was on from there.
Well, that explains why he brought back the hockey mask in 2001.
Yes.
Yes, it does. And now moving along here, we had Lex Luger and Barry Windham taking on Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard for the NWA World Tag Team Championship.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. This was a really great match. This was our match where we got to see our favorite referee from the NWA, Tommy Young.
Yes.
He never worked in the WWF, and it's too bad because he won't be remembered very well except by people like us who actually study the stuff. But for those of you guys out there wanting to learn how to referee, if that's your goal in wrestling, Tommy Young is a great person to follow.
Yes, and I just want to point out congratulations Tim White for finally making the WWE Hall of Fame a referee. Maybe this will open doors for guys like Tommy Young and others.
Now, he got it more for being a road agent and the stuff he did for Andre and a lot of other people, but it's still, Tim White was a great referee, and yeah, hopefully now they open the wing that we've always suggested.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this match. I went 3 stars. This was actually a very good card. You know, you didn't have too many matches that were there. You just had high quality, 20, 30-minute tag team style matches, and this made it well. I mean, Barry Windham and Lex Luger ended up coming out with the championships on this, which was amazing.
Yeah, but they had put a rocket under them because at this point in '88, the Brainbusters are about to go to the WWF, so they're not very far away from that. So they've kind of gone away from the Horsemen a little bit, trying to bring some new blood, revitalize the NWA. I also went 3 stars. This was a well-paced, well-timed, well-worked NWA-style tag team match, which they always did very well.
Yeah, and now we're going to move on to the main event.
The main event.
See, he was very happy on this one because this one was a quality main event. You had Ric Flair taking on Sting, 60-minute match. You had judges involved in this. This was just great to see. Something that you did not see normally there with judges.
Yep, this was actually 45 minutes, not 60.
Oh, 45, excuse me.
Now there were some things that did annoy me about this. The ring announcer, Tom Miller, when he went through and announced this match, he said there must be a winner. We'll get to why that's significant here in a few minutes. They had 5 judges at ringside. They had Gary Juster, Sandy Scott, a lady named Patty Mullen, who was the Penthouse Pet of the Year for 1987. Jason Hervey, who was the idiot from the Wonder Years that always hung out with Eric Bischoff and thought he was a wrestling fan. And Ken Osmond. So those are our 5 judges for this match between Sting and Ric Flair. At this time, also, Ric Flair was only a 5-time world champion.
Yeah, very young in his career. I mean, in comparison to lasting the next, 40 years afterwards, still going now, technically. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this match here was wonderful to watch. I mean, the problem was you had the same spot done several times at the beginning, but they started to pick it up midway forward. I really enjoyed this match, and for the precedence it set and the memorabilia, I'm going 4 stars on it.
I went 4 stars as well, yeah. Ric Flair's matches, this has been talked about a lot by a lot of other people. He starts his matches to include his most famous match with Ricky Steamboat that went 56 minutes. He basically does the same 3 moves for like the first 20 minutes of a match. And now, it's a credit to him that he makes it interesting. But if you're looking for anything more than 3 moves from the first 20 minutes, you're not going to get it from Ric Flair in a long match.
No, he was creative enough to keep it interesting, yes.
But the story took off actually at about the 15-minute point here on this one. It was they went a little bit faster. Sting was a little inexperienced, so he rushed it a little bit. You could see Rick kind of, okay, now we can go ahead and get going. You want to go, we'll go. And it was a well-paced, well-timed match. The selling and non-selling were all appropriate. There's times where Ric Flair throws the chop and Sting no-sells it, but it's done appropriately. They didn't no-sell just because they were big-timing. It was done with a purpose, and it made sense in the story.
And, of course, the finish of it with the Scorpion Deathlock there, you're like, is he going to tap out in 30 seconds? Holding on for that move for 30 seconds. How did he survive? And he did.
And he did. And here's where the significance of there must be a winner comes into play. Because Gary Juster voted for voted for Ric Flair. Patty Mullen voted for Sting. Sandy Scott voted for nobody. And Ken Osmond and Jason Hervey didn't turn in a card. So it was a tie.
How is that? Why? You have 5 judges and you only had 3 votes. Yes.
Watch the show, folks. Only 3 votes were turned in.
Oh, God.
So that's why there must be a winner, and it ends in a Broadway.
Yes, and just like I talked out in the beginning, after this match, we had the post show, and you could just see the disdain of Tony Schiavone, being near Jim Ross. Bob Caudle just standing there like, you know what, I'm not getting involved in this.
At this point, I was longing for Art Donovan, and how much did this guy weigh?
It was pretty bad. But that's the end of our show on this.
So what? It was a great show. This was a great selection that we went to Clash of the Champions.
Oh, yeah. You are happy with this, huh?
I was happy with Clash of Champions. It was a good show.
Well, I'm glad you were happy, because now we're moving on to the next one here. Another portion of our Clash of the Champions showcase here, I guess. This one here.
I guess we're going to have Pizza Hut in the catering.
Oh, yeah. And then some. I'm Dr. Quack.
Ding dong. Hello. And I'm the important one, Mr. Mayhem.
And we'll see you next time.